Hello and welcome to the BurnCast. I'm Brady Byrne.
And I'm Kim Cass.
Today we're looking at a book called Bacterium 264 by author Dutch Fisher. As always, any criticisms directed towards the authors and works that we discuss are exaggerated for entertainment purposes and are not meant to be taken personally. Thank you for listening, and we hope you enjoy the show. Let's talk about Bacterium 264.
Let's talk about Bacterium 264, and let's talk about the story of Marshall Freeman.
Yes, we do know the story of Marshall Freeman, and I would say that's a very accurate description because this is in fact a story for once.
Yeah, it's sort of a Along Comes Polly situation where finally we've met the right girl. She's complete from start to finish, and there's a start and there's a finish. Amazing. Amazing.
Yeah, and it seems that the theme of season 2 has been these books are not stories. And finally, nearing the end, we've come across one that does check all the boxes for what a story is.
Yeah.
Now, it's also weird as fuck.
It might be the strangest story we've read for the podcast, especially because its synopsis was a single sentence.
Yes.
Simply the story of Marshall Freeman. We had no idea where it was going to go, and no one could guess where this one was going to go.
No, not even Marshall Freeman.
No, not Marshall Freeman. And I would suffice to say that perhaps the author didn't even know where the story was going to go.
Yeah, I would bet on that as well, because the story, while being a story, does go off in some weird directions, and is, I would say, just weird in every way, especially in the dialogue.
Yeah.
Now, it's not terrible dialogue like we've seen in some of the other books, where it's just like there's no distinction between narration and dialogue and exposition. They're all just melded into the same thing, and some sentences have quotation marks on them. That's not how it is here, but it is almost inhuman.
Yeah, it's strange in the content. It's strange in the things that they actually say are weird.
Yeah.
You're like, a person wouldn't say that.
No.
Like, what's going on? But let's fire into the story, and finally, we can actually say that.
Yeah, it's been a long time coming.
I'm so happy about that.
So our story is about Marshall Freeman, and he is the vice president of media outreach at Getty & Sons Advertisement Agency. So he's a corporate guy. He's got a cushy job. He talks about how it has afforded him a classic red 1963 split-window Corvette coupe and gives his kids the opportunity to be at private school and keeps his wife tanning around the pool.
Yeah, he has a good job, he has a pretty good life, and he's a family man.
Yeah. Unfortunately, though, he is on a personal journey into death.
Oh, yes.
Because in the first paragraph, he tells you that in 10 days, he will be dead, and he's going to die a most horrific and unimaginable death.
Now, usually, I would say perhaps that's going to take all the tension out of a story. However, because of the content of the story and its unpredictability, it literally doesn't matter that he tells you that, because even knowing that, you have no idea what's going to happen next. Yeah. So, in fact, I think it works in this particular scenario.
Yeah, and because it's narrated from his perspective, and he does give you kind of like a time scale, he says on this day, on this day, on this day, at this time, there are certain points where his narration catches up to the story he's telling, so to speak. And so you do wonder, is he going to die, or is that just how he thought things were going to turn out near the end. And so, yes, while he does tell you, I'm going to die in 10 days, it is still quite interesting to read those 10 days because some weird fucking shit happens to him in those 10 days. Really unpredictable stuff.
Yes. So the story starts off with him going through his morning routine, so to speak, on just a regular day. Now, again, no aspect of the story is normal.
No.
Not even his morning routine.
No, his morning routine is actually one of the weirdest parts about this book.
So Marshall wakes up, gets dressed at around 5:15, and this story has a very careful manner about telling you exactly when things happen, to the minute.
Yes.
And he prepares himself for work. He talks to his wife, who reminds him of his dentist appointment. Yeah. Which he doesn't like so much, the reminders, because he doesn't like going to the dentist.
No, he doesn't.
Fair enough. And to that point, I was like, okay, there's nothing too weird about that.
Yeah, it's pretty normal so far. Until he gets out of his room, he says, have a good day to his wife. And he goes down the hall to his teenage son's room. And the first thing his son says to him at 5:15 a.m. says, "Morning, Dad. Have a nice day at work. And don't forget you have a dentist appointment this afternoon. Love you." And Marshall says, "Good morning, son. And don't forget to clean up the dog do in the yard today." "We don't have a dog," Mike Riley retorted. With that, I left him to doze back off for another hour before he had to get up for school. So either you've got this teenage boy who is wide awake at 5:15 in the morning, which no teenager is.
And aware of his dad's day-to-day schedule.
Yeah, or he went and woke him up.
Randomly.
Just to say goodbye.
Yeah.
And okay, it's like, all right, it's not that weird.
Yeah, to that point I was like, odd, but maybe just like a accident or like some sort of thing. But then he goes to his second son, who's only 4 years old.
Yeah, who is also up bright and early, wide awake at 5:15 a.m., waiting for him to remind him that he has a dentist appointment.
Basically repeats what the older son has just said to him. So he gets, his wife says this, his teenage son says this, and then his child son says this. And within the very first few pages of this book, I am already going, whoa, what's going on? And it's not as if, saying goodbye to your kids is that strange in the morning.
No, but what children are up at 5:15 a.m. waiting to tell their dad that he has a dentist appointment? It's just a little off. It's not so out there that you're like, this isn't written by a human, but you're wondering, like, what, who wrote, why? Yeah, like,
why?
What?
And it wouldn't be strange if it didn't tell you the exact times.
Yes.
If the little sections didn't start with the exact minute of when they happened, you would be like, okay, whatever.
And this was quite funny to me because I found myself talking about this book with someone who listens to the podcast but doesn't read these kinds of books. They're quite a well-read reader and they read quite good books, I would say. And I'm telling them about this strange opening and the kind of like slightly off human behavior. And they started asking me like, oh, do you think this is some sort of social critique or a commentary on this, or is this a surrealist? And I have to stop them and remind them that this is not Kafka we're reading, okay? Like,
yeah, no.
And this isn't like a David Lynch film. The surrealism, it's not here on purpose, as far as I could tell. It's just weird shit that you can't really explain because it's not like all that stuff is there for a reason. There's no reason why he talks to his children this way. It's there and you kind of just move past it.
Yeah. And now I want to reiterate that the story and the behaviors that the characters have, they're all sort of normal, but they're all slightly off. They're all just off by just a touch.
Yeah.
To where I'm going, really?
Yeah, like Marshall Freeman, just as he's finishing off his morning, it says he goes downstairs, opens up the fridge, and grabs a nice cold can of
Mountain Dew.
Yeah, he grabs a Mountain Dew at 6 a.m.
6 a.m.
And he drinks Mountain Dew throughout the whole story. He specifically says, I grabbed a Mountain Dew.
Yeah.
And he drinks Mountain Dew with his coffee. This is a section where he's waking up the next day. He says, the usual morning ritual, found myself in the kitchen grabbing a nice cold Mountain Dew before heading to the garage. Goes into work. It says, being the creature of habit I am, all I had to do was say, good morning, this is Marshall, and head for the drive-thru. Bacon, egg, and cheese on wheat washed down with a cold Mountain Dew, and I'm good to go for a few hours. And then 2 more lines later, it's like the news was waiting for me online, and nothing like a big cup of coffee to sit on top of a can of cold Mountain Dew to flush one's kidneys for the next 2 hours or so.
Oh, what?
That's 3 Mountain Dews that he's had between 5:45 a.m. and 7:16 a.m. That's insane.
Yeah, this man.
He's a Mountain Dew fiend.
Yeah, it's so. I could accept that if you presented the character as a little bit strange, but this character is supposed to be a regular guy, and he's at the top of his job, and he's a good family man, and everyone's oh yeah, he's a good bloke, that guy, and he is really.
Yeah, he's a good dad. He's a good businessman.
Usually the characters we're looking at are assholes.
Yeah,
but this man, he's a good man.
Now, if he likes to have a cold can of Mountain Dew with a steaming hot cup of Joe, who am I to say that's weird?
Yeah.
But it is.
And it's he kisses his son on the forehead, and he says that, I'll kiss him for as long as I can, and I will, because he loves his kids.
Yeah, before he grows out of it.
Yeah, it's wholesome, and then you get that, And then I grabbed my Mountain Dew. Like, and I also want to mention that the dialogue is also like this. Even in the very beginning, you get these mentions of the children bringing up the dentist appointment, but then also the mannerisms they have, like the okie dokie smoky, like everyone's a little bit too jive, a little bit off, just a tiny bit so where your eyebrow is raised.
Yeah, and I would say it keeps you interested.
Yeah, it definitely does.
Because otherwise you're reading about a guy getting up in the morning and doing his daily routine and going to work, and it would be boring as shit. But instead, you're like reading this really closely and you're like, what is going on here? This is just a bit strange.
Yeah.
But so as he's going through his morning, he starts reading an article about dentistry, which starts to claim that a new treatment for teeth cleaning has been discovered. And it's using a substance called Bacterium 264, which is supposed to attack plaque and surface decay on tooth enamel, which is like a part of the tissue of a tooth. And so this is actually what I would say is exposition done well. You know, we don't get to the office and the doctor pulls out the Bacterium 264 and says, I'm now going to apply the Bacterium, which does this and that.
Or even worse, it would be like, the doctor pulled out the Bacterium 264, and then it would just say in the narration, Bacterium 264 was like a, you know.
Yeah, exactly. Like, this slides it into the narrative in an unobtrusive way.
And it's not long, it's very short.
It's just a sound bite, and it tells you everything you need to know about it. And then later in the story, when things with the Bacterium start to go a bit wrong, then it starts to tell you what's really going on with it. And that is the proper way to pace out your information.
Oh, yes.
Kudos, Dutch Fisher, for understanding what a story is and how storytelling works.
Yeah, and how exposition should be.
Yes, but also what is going on in your brain, because the story is fucking weird.
Stop drinking Mountain Dew in the morning.
So basically, he starts his day, goes to work, he's going through corporate conferences, he has a few copyright disputes, and he has his partner at the office, and her name is Lynn. And she's a bit of a sassy gal, but she's not written as like a shitty character who's just like a dumb secretary assistant. No, she's actually quite witty.
She's onto it, yeah.
Yeah, she's onto it. And Marshall treats her with respect. He even calls out, like, I would never insert myself in some office romance bullshit because I respect her as my business partner and not as an object of affection.
Yeah. He does give a little bit of exposition on, like, of course, he has to describe how she looks attractive and describes what she's wearing. However, and I was like, oh no, here we go. Like, you know, this is what I was trying to avoid. But the way he like backs it up with, but I would never, you know, like, it's like he's running through it in his head that he identifies her as attractive and makes a special point of saying, like, I respect her as my colleague, you know?
Yeah. He says, Lynn is my most valued coworker. She is attractive from head to toe, but never seductive or suggestive. Today, she was wearing her hair up and a sensible suit jacket with a dark blue top, black slacks, and as always, a comfortable pair of tennis shoes, which she kept in her bottom desk drawer for running around in the office. She informed me on her first day of work she was not a coffee fetcher, although many times she will. She also informed me that speaking innuendos to her was off limits, and since that first day, our conversations have been nothing but professional. I also found if I treat her as an equal in a lateral position, my sales hover somewhere around 92%, which is why it's my name on the sign in the parking garage as opposed to other so-called market techs who receive paychecks every other Friday. Marshall Freeman is a good fucking guy. Like,
yeah,
you know, he recognizes that he's got a beautiful partner, but he recognizes that, you know, I'm going to treat this person as equal, and that's better for our working relationship if we keep that relationship above the water.
It's done in a way where you're like, okay, this person isn't an asshole. Like, I see why you would do that. And to be honest, I really appreciate that. It's like a breath of fresh fucking Mountain Dew. Like, it really is.
Yeah. And how unfortunate for us that we're sitting here praising normal fucking human behavior.
What a sweet angel.
As if it's like some strange thing we've never encountered before in writing. So we're introduced to Lynn, and she also reminds him that he has a dentist appointment. And then he says back to her, you're as bad as Sandy and the boys for reminding me I have a dentist appointment this afternoon. And Sandy and the boys comes up all the time.
Sandy and the boys, yeah.
Not just from him either. You know, people are always like, oh, how are Sandy and the boys? Sandy and the boys are great. Thank you for asking. Like, It's just a little quirky thing you've got going on here.
And I wanted to get to where it sounds like it's the same person talking to the same person, even though they're different people.
Yeah.
Like, everyone sounds like the same. They all speak in the same sort of manner. They're all, like, shortening their mornings, you know? And it's all a little bit, like, too similar to one another where you're like,
yeah.
None of these characters have their own voice. They all sound a little bit mimicky.
They just sound like Marshall Freeman.
Yeah, they sound like Marshall Freeman. And and when Marshall Freeman sounds a little bit strange, that makes all of the characters sound a little bit strange. A little bit off. Just a tint. And I also want to mention another oddity of the story, another characteristic of Marshall Freeman is his own love for his own comedy.
Oh yeah, he fucking loves his own jokes.
He often tells himself jokes in thought. And I just want to mention one here as he's looking through the magazines. And he reads a story about Spock, dying or something like that. And then he sees a picture of Justin Bieber standing on the red carpet. And then it makes him think of a joke he's heard and repeated a few times. Teams of American lawyers have been hired to stop Justin Bieber's extradition back to Canada. In a related story, a team of Canadian lawyers has been hired to stop Justin Bieber's extradition back to Canada. And it's like so dryly inserted.
It's so dry, yeah.
Yeah, and that's not like the one joke. That is an example of the types of jokes he's telling himself.
Yeah, and so speaking of things are off, there's a section where he's talking to Lynn, and so he's got this big account that he's wrestling with. It's from some corporate entity that wants to back out of their deal with his company.
Yes.
And there's a clause in the contract where if he's not available for the next couple of days, then the company can back out of their deal. So he's under pressure to just be available.
Yeah, at all times.
So he's got this account weighing over him. And in the meantime, he's trying to get the fuck out of this dentist appointment because he just doesn't want to go. He hates the dentist. And so he calls out the dentist and he's about to reschedule it. And Lynn says to him, "Don't you dare reschedule that appointment. It'll take 5 months to get you another one." And Marshall asks her, "How did you hear that?" And she says, "Ears of steel," she said after handing the phone back. And it's like, ears of steel? Is that a common expression I'm not aware of? Or does it make no fucking sense?
It's like you walk down the beach and you see someone and they've got like huge pecs. And it's like, damn, that guy's got pecs of steel because they're so defined and big. And that would make sense, you know?
Yeah, or if you don't cough easily, you say I have lungs of steel. It's like a resilience thing.
Yeah. It's not like a sharpenist or is hearing.
Yeah. It just doesn't make any sense.
But like you could say, I got like eagle eyes works.
Yeah.
You know, because you're like, I saw that from a far distance. I got eagle eyes.
If you're trying to denote that a quality of yours is sharp and accurate, you would use something else. It's not like I have fucking ears of steel.
Yeah.
This is like, okay, I've got a nose of glass. Does that tell you that I can smell really well? Not really.
No.
So you say, yeah, someone has a glass jaw. Like, you know what that means. It makes sense.
Yeah.
And people talk like this all the time. They just have these weird little expressions that just seem a little bit off.
It's like he tried to come up with his own thing there, but it doesn't make any sense. Now, there is something because you are sort of introduced to the rest of the people in the office, and he talks about the people he likes, obviously Lynn and things like that, but he talks about the people he doesn't like as well.
Yeah.
His competing colleagues and things like that, and his boss. So you have these people, and one of them is a young lawyer who presents the contract issue to him, and as they talk, another one of these little dialogue things that I found very strange, but absolutely hilarious, is the lawyer finally closing the folder smugly and then smiling at him and says, "Guess you should have studied contract language better in college. This is why I make the really big bucks. Don't leave town or get hammered in the next 4 days, and you, me, and the company should be just fine." And I just love that. Like, you've got this, like, Harvard lawyer who comes in and he's just like, "This is why I make the really big bucks."
Yeah, I mean, there's all kinds of stuff like that. Yeah, just quirky little things. It sets you up with, like, realistic boundaries for these characters. Like, he's a corporate salesman. He's a corporate lawyer. But then the people don't really act like your idea of them. They kind of act like goofy versions of them, but still, like, in a realistic way.
Yeah, they act like Marshall Freeman acts. Like,
But so he doesn't get out of the dentist appointment.
no, of course not.
And so he does end up there, and his dentist is a bit of an odd guy as well. His name is Dr. Pasquale, but Marshall calls him Dr. Feely Hands. Because he says he looks like a nice enough man, 5'8", slightly round around the waist, a yuppie black-dyed ponytail with short hair beard to match, and of course a perfect smile. Problem is, he's always touching me. Not inappropriate in any manner, but still always touching me. Last time he was giving me instructions on how to brush my teeth, he placed his finger on top of my hand, then placed his other hand flat on my chest. I guess in case I needed to run, he could just push me back in the chair. He then made a slicing motion with the finger that was on my hand. He does a little demonstration. And every time he interacts with him, Dr. Feely Hands is getting his feely hands all over Marshall.
And now, at least this character is described as being strange, or at least unusual.
Yeah.
And so he's kind of the only one who fits into, like, what he's doing.
Yeah, true.
Like, all of the other characters act strange, but they're not presented as strange, so it comes off to the reader as strange. Well, you have this Dr. Feely Hands, and, like, because he's touching people strangely, you're not going, wait, why? Why is he doing that? Because the characters within the story recognize that that is strange, you know?
Yeah. So you've got all this slightly off behavior, but so far, everything up until this point has been pretty normal. You know, he's a normal guy. He's got issues at work. Who doesn't? And he doesn't like going to dentists. He shows up there. He's got a bit of a weird relationship with his dentist. And
as we all do.
Yeah, as we all do. And in fact, a funny little commentary of his when he is with the dentist and he starts having a conversation with Marshall as they're like cleaning his teeth. And he asks him, "How we doing, Mr. Freeman?" And Marshall's inner monologue goes, "Under the current circumstances, there was a question you knew I couldn't answer it this time, but he asked it anyways. I think dentists get off on stuffing your mouth full of nasty-tasting foreign objects, then try to carry on a conversation with you." And I'm like, yeah, they fucking do.
That is true.
It's like, all right, Marshall Freeman, weird fucking guy. But I can relate to him.
Yeah. I might not share his Mountain Dew enthusiasm, but I get why he doesn't like the dentist.
So, yeah, so far, you've demonstrated to me that this is a real person who thinks like a real person. Has a little odd quirks here and there, and maybe there's something more to that as the story progresses, but you are giving me a sense that this is a real character and not just
a mindless, like, caricature of someone's fantasy or fetish. It's not like a self-insert. This person is really like a character with realistic ambitions and goals and a life that you believe, like, it's incredible.
Yeah, it's strange to me.
What is this?
It's been so long since I've read a book that's not for the podcast, and so I do get surprised these days when I read something that is quite normal and quite engaging. But so up to this point, nothing strange has really happened so far until we get to the Bacterium. And so they're telling him about it. They're saying it's this new treatment for teeth cleaning. And Dr. Feely Hands has got his assistant Brenda with him. And she is about to apply the Bacterium. It says, I turned my face towards him, opened my mouth, and sat there absolutely petrified for the next minute or so. Brenda handed the vial to him, and that's when I heard him say something about the seal being broke on the cap. Brenda, did you break the seal? Yes, Dr. Pasquale. Should I have left it sealed? Just for future reference. The solution becomes active when exposed to the air, so the longer we keep the bottle sealed, the better. Yes, sir. And then they carry on with the treatment. And so you're given this little hint that, like, maybe something isn't quite right. And this is, your proper foreshadowing, where you read that and you know that's not good. But the characters don't instantly freak out. They're like, you broke the seal! Like,
yeah.
Let me really isolate this as, like, the turning point of something bad happening. It's just kind of treated as a casual thing, and it's not even talked about until way later.
Yeah.
And that's the proper way to set something like that up.
Now, in Born of the Shade, it may have happened that if the seal was broken, he would have quickly fired off and told you, the seal was broken because Dr. Toboggan or whatever tampered with it before for 3 hours.
Yeah, exactly. But no, with this, it's just on to the next thing, okay? They apply the treatment. You're thinking, well, maybe the nurse is just a bit clumsy or it's a new treatment. They don't have the exact procedure down just yet. But so everything seems to go well. He's really enjoying his teeth being as clean as the Bacterium seems to have cleaned them. So after he gets the treatment, his teeth are super clean.
Yep, they're whitened to their maximum extent, and he's pretty satisfied.
Yeah.
For once, he's satisfied from his dentist appointment.
Yeah. Now, people do start noticing that he's licking his teeth a lot. Why are you doing that weird thing with your tongue? You know, he's licking the back of his teeth. Every time he talks, he's like running his tongue over the front of his teeth a little bit. You know, just a little quirkiness.
Yeah.
Nothing's really happened yet to him.
And it did make me wonder, like, I thought it was going to be something really stupid for some reason, like, his teeth are going to get really sharp and he's going to get a hunger, you know, like, I thought literally that's where it was going.
I've got the hunger for like the Mountain Dew.
Yeah, you know, like, I don't know why, but I thought that, like, he was going to get some sort of, he's going to have to eat something odd. I don't know why.
Because of the shit we usually read, I guess.
Yeah, he needs some Lycanade.
Yeah, he needs some fucking Lycanade. But so they keep telling him about his tongue, and he doesn't really notice that he's doing it himself. And that night, he has a bad dream about his teeth kind of coming loose, and he feels like it's gravel moving around in his mouth. And I thought that was a pretty interesting little dream sequence. Normally, I hate dream sequences because they're convenient ways to develop like character emotion. But it's actually quite accurate to how he's feeling, because I've had that dream. I've had that exact dream before, where my teeth feel like they're moving around like gravel. It says his bottom front teeth start shifting in his mouth. No pain, just shifting teeth. Tries to talk to someone, but the words come out unnatural. It just feels more like gravel and teeth coming out in sections. I've literally had that dream. It's like a recurring dream. And Marshall talks about how it's a recurring dream he has. So I'm finding more and more I relate to this guy, Marshall Freeman. And it's just very interesting.
It's you, Brady. It's you.
Yeah, maybe I'm on a personal journey into my own bacterium-related illness. But so things start to get even worse throughout the next day. He notices he starts drooling. He's got a little bit of drool coming out the side of his mouth. You know, he's going to corporate conferences and his shirt's getting a little wet.
And Lynn's telling him to dab his chin and cheek because he's slobbering.
So he's at work and he bails out of a very important conference call with this company who has the contract dispute.
3M.
Yeah, and for some reason, he then gets a big promotion.
Yeah, now that's the one part on the story that I didn't, well, it's not the only part in the story that I didn't understand, but it came out of nowhere and it didn't really make any sense because it's not as if he was doing a very good job.
No, the preceding scene is his boss being like, yo, what the fuck? Why'd you dip out of that meeting? You could have just lost us the account.
Yeah, and he's also got this heat on him, you know, to do a good job on this because, you know, it's his ass on the line, basically.
Yeah.
Or that's the way he feels anyway. And then he gets this massive promotion, and Lynn does too. Maybe Lynn deserved it.
Yeah, I mean, they come out of the meeting and, you know, the boss is like, so Lynn's going to be promoted to vice president of, like, global marketing. And Marshall's like, hey, you know, good for her. She deserves it. I wonder how much more she's going to get paid for me. And then the boss is like, and you're getting promoted to president of global marketing.
And he's like, oh, shit. Now, at this point in the story, I also wanted to mention that this is the part where I was like, okay, well, you haven't really thought about some of the story aspects. And of course, you don't know his life before that, and he could have been working really hard. But
yeah,
the first part of the story really sets up that classic setup of, you better land this account, buddy, or you're getting fired, you know?
Yeah, he's all worried about it. It's like the biggest pressure of his career. And he completely fucks it up, and he still gets a massive promotion.
I thought, at this point in the story, because I went from thinking that Bacteria was some sort of going to make him a hungry boy, and now I was like, oh, is it some sort of like, you know, maybe when he speaks, like, the bacteria, like, goes into other people's brains or whatever and makes them, you know, help him so he gets, like, successful or something. And I don't know what I was thinking, but I was like, does it have something to do with the bacteria? Like,
and I think that's good, to be honest. Remember when we read All Your Ruins, and as soon as the kaiju blight shows up in a scene, it's like, here's a layout of how this works and everything that's going to happen with it in the story, basically.
Yeah.
And this book doesn't do that. It keeps you guessing. You're like, okay, why is he licking his teeth? You know, at dinner that night, when he's talking about the promotion he just got, he starts developing a lisp, and you're like, all right, you know, something odd is going on here, but you don't know yet. And I would say that that's real tension. I would say that even though this isn't a book about, like, terrorists, or it's not an action-adventure thing.
Yeah, a plot to kidnap President King on board Flight 9643.
Yeah, it's not about monsters, it's not about fighting anyone, and yet it has the most tension out of all the books, basically. Because it's actually, like, hinting at things as they develop.
Now, I do want to say that, having read the book, the promotion Now, it very much didn't make any sense. It didn't seem to play out for any reason. You don't get to know really why he gets a promotion, you know?
Yeah.
So, in hindsight, it's pretty dumb, you know? But small criticisms along the way.
Yeah. So he gets the lisp, and the next night he has another bad dream in which he wakes up in the middle of the night and punches his wife in the face. And she kicks him out of the bed, but then he wakes up again to realize that that was just a dream. So he's having a little bit of a weird time.
Mm-hmm.
And he gets up bright and early the next day and has himself a nice Mountain Dew for breakfast. And at this point, his lisp is getting pretty bad and his teeth are starting to get loose.
And I do want to say that through many of the stories we read, I end up skipping a lot. But because of this book's strangeness, and it's just taking different turns and you don't really know what's going on. He develops this lisp and all of a sudden I'm reading every page word for word because I don't want to miss anything.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, there might be a tiny detail in here. There might be some, whatever.
Yeah.
And it's amazing.
Or, it's going to subvert my expectations and be like, there was nothing wrong with the bacterium. It's actually the Mountain Dew that he's drinking that's fucking up his teeth and fucking up his brain. I was like, man, this is going to be like a sugar overdose story or something. I don't know.
Sugar overdose story. One of those classic sugar dose stories.
Yeah, I mean, it's an established genre. But at least it keeps you guessing with that sort of thing, despite being a rather mundane plot. He's not a fucking badass. He's not Mr. America's gotta go fight the Chinese underground. Like, he's just a dude. And yet the story of Marshall Freeman
is the story.
It's actually interesting, yeah. But so his lisp is getting worse, his teeth are starting to come loose, and he starts to think, I gotta go see this fucking dentist guy. I gotta go see Dr. Feelyhands and see what the fuck is up. And they do some x-rays on him, and another issue he's been having is, like, he scraped his knuckle or something on, like, his car door. And he put his hand in his mouth to, suck the blood and to, like, lick the wound a bit. And so when he goes to the dentist to get x-rays done on his teeth, he gets word back that there's something going on with his bones. His bones are starting to, like, curl in on themselves on his finger and in his jaw.
Mm.
And that's when you start to think that, oh man, he put his hand in his mouth and whatever has been happening with this bacterium shit in his mouth has now transferred to his hand.
Needs to start drinking more milk.
He needs to put the Mountain Dew down, yeah.
But so he gets this promotion and he opens the car door in excitement and just, like, grazes his knuckle.
Yeah.
And at first I was like, whatever, it was a strange point but it actually plays out.
Yeah.
Like, there's an actual reason, like, and it's amazing.
Yeah, it's not told to you, like, and then Marshall shouldn't have done that.
Oh, no.
He shouldn't have put his hand in the mouth because that's where all the bacteria... Nope. It doesn't even identify that. You just have to be a diligent reader and pick that up.
Now, I was wondering, like, he does kiss his wife, and things like that. And I kind of thought, like, oh, there's going to be bacteria at this point because it does mention, that his finger is now affected because of the knuckle injury and him sucking the blood.
Yeah.
But I was like, oh, what about his wife, And I thought it was going to be one of those sort of things that plays out. Now, that doesn't happen, but it did have me wondering,
Yeah.
And that's enough, to be honest. That's enough to keep me in it.
So, as Marshall's condition starts to get worse and his wife is starting to get a little worried, she's like, what's up with this lisp and this tongue-licking stuff and your teeth are getting a little loose?
And what the fuck's wrong with your finger?
Yeah. And we get cut to a different perspective of a character called Dr. Dorn. And this is another quirky little section of the story because several people are introduced as, like, Dr. William Dorn, or as he preferred to be called, Dr. Bill, and he is sort of the brainchild of this Bacterium 264, and it's kind of like a perspective of him at the lab where they've developed it, and they've got this funny little quirky moment where he has an intern or assistant who is of Asian descent and talks like a stereotype of Asians to an insulting degree.
Like a South Park thing.
Yeah.
Where it's like, oh, hello, Preach. Like,
it's literally that. It's literally that. He says, yes, hero, what is it? And then the Asian man says, he bowed in respect.
Yeah, like, what the fuck?
He bows in respect and says, your math is wrong, Breeze. What?
Now I would put that in the box of like strange racism or like straight, like just like misplaced, like, whatever.
I don't know. It seems pretty deliberate because every time he talks, he says "please." He's like, "Please, Dr. Bill." Like,
hello, please.
Let me get that flask for you, please.
Yeah, it's so strange and it was so off-putting, But it's not the only mention of strange, like, racism. I don't want to call it racism because that's not what I'm about to say, but perhaps ignorance of the rest of the world, if you're looking at this from an American perspective. Because earlier in the book, after he gets the promotion, he goes and tells Sandy about it, and he's like, okay, but I'm going to be flying to foreign countries a lot. And Sandy's face has a look of horror. She's horrified, and the kids, don't really understand it, and he mentions that the boys knew that the world was unrest, but did not know the extent. Sandy and I did. And I was like, okay, firstly, that's a terribly written sentence. I mean, it's so bad. But, like, what? How bad is the rest of the world? Like, what? Like, and where are you going? That's so, quote-unquote, unrest. Like, I was like, what? That's so strange. You make me think that, like, you think the rest of the world's in flames or something like that.
Yeah, it's just odd. Like, again, it's not so out there that you're throwing your hands up and you're like, this isn't written by someone who's ever left their hometown. But you're also sitting there thinking, this is not normal.
No.
There's just something off about it at all points, especially with this Asian character and also this Dr. Bill, because every character in this scene, and like kind of only this scene, is introduced and they're like, my name is Dr. William Dorn. I prefer to be called Dr. Bill. And he meets this other guy who's like, I'm Dr. Quentin Masters and I prefer to be called Dr. Masters. Please have a seat, Dr. Dorn.
Yeah, everyone's got a nickname.
So this Dr. Masters, he clearly doesn't respect Dr. Dorn's wish to be called Dr. Bill. They're talking about the bacterium, and Dr. Master says, I understand you're the genius behind Bacteria 264. Yes, I am, Dr. Dorn answered. And then he said, is there a prob? And then he's got off. He says, Dr. Dorn, please call me Dr. Masters, if not for any reason but to humor me. Sir is the old man down the street who has not spent 20-some years in many of the most prestigious schools, listening to some of the most boring professors so I can wear the title of doctor. I, like yourself, on the other hand, have. So, it only seems fitting that mutually, I'll call you Dr. Dorn and you call me Dr. Masters. Deal? And then Dr. Dorn says, yes, of course, Dr. Masters. How contemptuous of me. I do apologize. And that's like most of this scene. It's just them bickering over like what to call each other.
Yeah, it's
just very odd. Like, and you said you didn't skip a lot of this book. And I gotta say, some of this stuff I did scan my eyes over because I'm like, is this going anywhere? No, because those two characters don't even appear for the rest of the story.
No.
It's like, what is the point of this little bickering about what to call each other if they're not main characters?
Yeah, there's actually a lot of stuff like that. And I would say that's just like a common thing of like an amateur book where it's written off the fly and they didn't go back and you can analyze the paragraph on paragraph, but you need to go back and say, what did this chapter do? Why did it move the story forward? How is this relevant?
But I think it's something different. I think it's because the author of this book kind of sees it as a comedy and he thinks it's funny.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, just think about it. Think of all like the stupid jokes that Marshall Freeman tells himself. Like, it's such dry jokes that you don't even notice they're jokes half the time. And I think that's kind of the tone this story carries, is like that it's kind of funny.
Yeah.
But it's just weird. It's not really that funny.
Yeah, no. In fact, I thought it was kind of sad.
Oh, it's an extremely sad story. It's extremely tragic for Marshall Freeman and his family and the fallout of what happens to him.
Yeah, and also the story starts off and it's like, in 10 days, I'm going to die a most horrific death. This is my story. That's not the way you start off with a comedy. It's like, the way you would start a comedy about yourself dying, it's like, welp, I got a few seconds left to live. How did I get here,
Record scratch.
I should have just kept my Mountain Dew to myself, or something like that,
Yeah, something stupid. I don't know, it's an oddity, I would say.
Now, there are things that I did laugh at in this story, but they were the unintentional comedic moments. For example, as Marshall Freeman's health is deteriorating, more of his body starts becoming more jelly-like. He wakes up on the side of his face and it's a little bit flat on one side and stays that way, and he's really having a tough time of it.
Yeah, his bones are really turning into soup.
Yeah, they're going up in a big way. Now, obviously, they're trying to get to Dr. Feely Hands and they're trying to communicate with people, and so They finally get in to see the doctor and so on and so forth. And they see him once and then they see him again after his face is really botched. And Dr. Feelyhands is quite shaken by this. He is quite sickened by what he sees as they approach him in the car park of the dentistry.
Yeah.
And he puts on a charming smile, but it immediately becomes a waterfall of uncontrolled vomit. So he's vomiting, and Sandy, Marshall Freeman's wife, Sandy Freeman, slaps him in the face as he's puking. I just cracked up.
Yeah, that's a great scene.
Can you imagine the dentist is puking and the wife slaps him while he's doing it, just sending puke all over. Oh my god, that got me good.
And Dr. Feelyhands is another funny character. There's so many funny moments with him. As the guy who created Bacterium 264, Dr. Bill or Dr. Doran, whatever, is learning that something has gone wrong with one of the patients who received the treatment. He tries to call Dr. Feelyhands and ask him if perhaps the bacterium was unsealed too early, as we know it was. And Dr. Feelyhands, as soon as he hears this, he says, "I did not authorize that information to be shared. Good day," and hangs up. He's like, fuck this.
I don't even want to be a dentist anymore.
I don't care that I may have ruined this man's life. I don't care if the person who created the substance knows anything about how to resolve it. I didn't authorize that information to be shared, so fuck you. Good day.
I also love how, when he gets slapped in the face after puking, he, points to Marshall Freeman and he's like, "That thing, what is it?" And it's
yeah,
what?
And he tells them to fuck off. It's not his problem.
Yeah. Oh, he's the most, rude, unprofessional,
And this is where things start to get even more weird because, so the doctor won't see them. They haven't heard anything about what's happening with him from the dentist, and the dentist won't listen to the guy who created the stuff to see if they can fix it. Dr. Feelyhands tries to blame Brenda for this, and Brenda's basically like, "Fuck you, bitch. It ain't my problem either. You're the one who signed off on the treatment." And so Marshall's bones are getting so bad he can barely talk. Now he's writing his thoughts down on a piece of paper so that his wife can interpret him because he's just got this slack jaw. One of his eyes is starting to melt below his cheekbone. He's a mess. He's turning it into a walking puddle of soup. And his wife, Sandy, pleads for him to go to the hospital. She's like, "Please, we've got to get you to a doctor."
As if you wouldn't, go as soon as your finger turns to jelly.
Yeah, no, Marshall's response is, "Nah, I'll write it out." It's all good. It's all good, I'll wait another week for the doctor to, recommend some treatment or whatever.
Give me antibiotics,
And the only thing he really cares about is he's got this contract work, and if he's unavailable, the contract will be given up, and so he wants to rush this document to Lynn at work. And on their way there, in the parking lot of his office, a bunch of black SUVs show up and basically kidnap Marshall and his wife.
Yeah.
And Lynn sees this. They slam Marshall and his wife to the car and they abscond with him and they disappear. And Lynn's reaction is not to run inside and tell her boss. She crashes through a glass window. And she bursts through this glass window and rushes into the boss's office, bleeding out of her hands.
Oh my god.
And she's like, "Oh my god, they took Marshall." And you're like, wait a second. This is cool, calm Lynn, the savvy business gal who's not a coffee fetcher. And
she doesn't have time to open the door, Brady. She's gonna bust through the glass.
I'm gonna fling myself through the fucking glass window. And her boss is like, "What the fuck?" But so they take Marshall and his wife off to the airport and reveal that they're Homeland Security.
I also want to mention, Lynn burst through the fucking glass into the office, and she's like, "Al, they took him in broad daylight. They grabbed him up right down the street, And then the boss is like, "Grabbed who up, Lynn? Do you know you're bleeding all over my floor?" They just busted through the glass. What sort of comment is that?
Watch the carpet, girl.
These people act they just
they're inhuman.
They act like lizards.
They really are. And so these agents take Marshall and his wife off to the airport.
Wait, I'm not finished. So, right after that, Lynn looks down at her hands, with panic, and she says, "Marshall, they took him. it was a scene straight out of the movies. Like, like that's everything is slightly. And she's like, I'm not kidding you. All those people dressed in suits, they all look like Secret Service or something. Real Black Ops stuff. Just across the intersection. And it says that she's panicked, but she presents it as if it was cool. Like, she's like. It's like,
wow, it's so cool. It's just like in the movies.
Yeah. It was total Black Ops stuff.
Yeah, they also took our coworker who's turning into a fucking noodle at this point.
Oh my god. And yeah, I was reading this and I didn't know what the tone was anymore. Like, I was like,
I don't know whether to be like tense, like, oh my god, they've got Marshall, or to like
laugh.
Because I'm like, this is just turning into such a surreal nightmare. But so they've taken him.
I'm not finished. Yeah. This scene's too good. So Al gets up and goes to his personal bathroom and grabs a few white cotton towels and then brings them back to her, and
that'll do her up.
Yeah, and then Lynn walked to his window and looked out. You mean that intersection right there? And he was pointing down the street, and it's like, yes, motherfucker, what? Yes, that, like, how much explanation do you need? Like,
that's a bit slow, this guy. That's what the Black Ops took your fucking guy.
And Lynn continues, yes, right there at that intersection. I'm telling you, Al, they had the street blocked off, and there must have been about 20 black unmarked cars and 50 agents. They surrounded them, and then they just hauled them off in a swarm of activity. and Al still is like just raising an eyebrow. Like, all he does is like, yeah. and then finally he's like, let me take a look at your hand. Like, and it's like, call the cops, do something. Why are you people? Why you guys aren't? Oh, you're like fucking robots pretending. Like,
they're not matching the intensity of the scene. It seems like at any second now they're going to unzip their face and the fucking cockroach aliens are gonna walk out into the office.
I mean, like, literally, you have another huge, like, Al tells her to go see a nurse or something, and she says, I'll do none of the above until I find out what just happened. Broad daylight, Al. It was broad. It literally just happened.
It's like seconds ago, yeah.
She turned back to the window, stood there silent for a moment, and then spoke low and soft, almost as if speaking to only herself. No contract, Al. We never got Marshall to sign the contract. He was so caught up with the stupid dental thing, and we played right into it. He might have not been talking perfect, but sure as I'm standing here, he could have signed his name. But no, we had to coddle him and let him drive to Cleveland, didn't we? We need Marshall, Al, and we needed him this morning. She kept staring out the window, talking to herself in that low monotone. What on God's green earth were those two up to? And why the ambulance? Al quietly stepped to Lynn's side and looked in the direction of the intersection with her. Calmly, he said, okay, Lynn, take me through what you saw and leave the hysterics out of it so I can try to get to better understand of what to do. What? Like, she just explained. She literally just, like, how much, like, what is Al... Is Al literally like how much brain power does he have in his skull? Like I was reading this and I had to go back and I'm like, what is like, these people are just not reacting in any way normal to each other or the situation or to anything. Like,
he didn't have his Mountain Dew that morning.
Oh my god!
Everyone knows to keep saying it's that Mountain Dew and power coffee combo. Otherwise, your brain juices don't flow properly.
Oh my god, that was the most insane scene, the most strange scene, and the rest of the book is fun because it's not so intense, but this is like an action scene, you know?
Yeah.
And no one, I don't know, like, you just heard it then. Like, what, how do you just...
It's batshit insane.
Yeah.
So, the agents take Marshall and his wife to the airport, and they reveal that they are with Homeland Security. Now, again, Marshall is almost a complete noodle at this point. He can barely move his left arm, and his right arm is just completely... There's no bones in it, basically. They've all turned to mush. And so the Homeland Security are telling him about his condition and what they have looked into from his x-rays. And they're like, oh, where did you get this information? And they say, oh, we got it from the assistant to the dentist, Barb. And Marshall can't talk at this point, but he's like shaking his head. He's like, no, her name wasn't Barb, it was Brenda. And they check again, and they're like, Nah, pretty sure her name was Barb. Like, I think you got that one wrong there, buddy. Like,
Mr. Goo Man.
yeah, many of your fucking ears have turned to soup already, so you didn't catch it quite right. So you start to wonder, like, okay, maybe Brenda's got something more going on with her because she's the one who unsealed the thing in the first place before it was ready, and now she's, like, giving them a fake name, and there's just a lot of shady shit going on. And sometime later, I don't have any notes for, like, the rest of the story because nothing really happens. Like, I have sometime later, he's on life support.
Yeah, no, this part, there are these weird sections where it's talking about some army dudes, which I really didn't get the relevance of.
Yeah, there's all these cutaways to, like, these army sergeants, and they all have, like, these weird names.
Yeah, and they're joking with each other and complaining with each other and, like, doing, like, really bad comedy and doing shitty German accents and, like, mocking their boss and stuff like that. And it all, like, I'm like, what is this?
I still cannot tell you what that's for or why it's here.
Luckily, they're short scenes and they go by quite quickly.
Yeah, but like, okay, so we've got some weird scenes with some army men, and sometime later, Freeman is on life support. His bones have nearly liquefied, and he overhears from like the nurses talking to him that he's like the 26th person to have this affliction. And he also learns that they are now trying to study his condition so that they can weaponize the bacterium. And I want to read some of Freeman's inner monologues at this point, because this is when he really starts to descend into, like, mad noodle man.
Yeah, like, because he can only really talk to himself. He can't even write anymore. And these people keep coming in and doing stuff to him or, like, arguing with each other, and he just cannot do anything about it. So he just, like, talks to himself, and he keeps talking about how funny he is, and, like, it gets weird.
Yeah, like, the rest of this book pretty much is just Marshall Freeman's inner monologues. And he's just, like, rambling to himself. He says, I have become conscious to a dream-like state. My eyes won't open and I can't talk. However, I can still hear and I can still smell. The nightmare is mine, all mine. For whatever reason, my mind jumps to a sequence of Bugs Bunny or Daffy Duck cartoon where they find some hidden treasure and Daffy Duck is screaming, it's mine, mine, I tell you, all mine, while stomping Bugs back in his rabbit hole. The insanity of Daffy's laughter fades quick when I realize that thump-thump whoosh sound I'm hearing coincides with the rising of my chest, and the thump hiss that follows is the collapse of my chest. I'm on life support. And then he continues to, like, just kind of ramble to himself. There's a section here where the people are, like, talking about the bacterium to each other. And Brenda shows up, and it's revealed that she is, like, behind this plot to weaponize the bacterium.
Oh, yeah. Oh, this was...
It's stupid as shit, but she's talking about how the bacterium uses saliva enzymes as a means to distribute itself. Plain and simple, the saliva was just the vehicle, and eventually it killed off the bacteria, and everyone went along their merry way. So now we have 4 alive still, where the enzyme mutated and transformed the hard bone structure into a substance so pliable it won't support the human body anymore. This syndrome, which we are now calling the 10-day syndrome, has affected 26 people worldwide. Mr. Freeman here is the only American and the only subject we have access to. And then another nurse asks, okay, so why here? He's not contagious, so why park him all the way down here? And then, like, Marshall's monologues just go, like, insane. He says, park? They parked me? I hope they got me in between the yellow lines properly. The plaque in front of my parking spot reads, President of Foreign Marketing. Or it did read that. I wonder what it reads now. Let's see. President O, I must be going nuts, huh? Or maybe President of, here I am dying with rubber bones. So here I sit, parked all the way down here somewhere, and all my mind can do is make jokes. Yep, I'm nuts. Crazy as a loon. Insane in the membrane. Dem bones, dem rubber bones. What do you want for nothing? Rubber biscuits? No, I want rubber bones. The morning sun is shining like a red rubber ball. No, like red rubber bones. Boing, boing, boing.
He's just like...
It goes insane.
Yeah, and he keeps mentioning, like, how he's like, there I go again, slaying it with my humor. Comedy always seems to make coping better.
He's cracking himself up in this state. You know, they're talking about, like, oh, the enzyme has increased in mutation speed, and he goes off in his own head, sitting there, you know, a pile of liquid bones. He says, mutation speed, is that even a real thing? Hey, buddy, pull over. I'm the mutation cops and your mutant friends are mutating too fast. Let's slow it down a bit. After all, you're in a school zone. I crack myself up. And then they like continue with the dialogue.
It's so weird, but it's this like comedy that's presented to be funny and it's not funny. And then you have this like sad stuff.
It's tragic.
Tragic stuff where he's like, remember being a kid, and he like wants to see his son driving the new car that he gets, and like he has these scenes where he like sort of daydreams about like his son and driving and stuff like that. And it's like, oh man, he keeps like, will I live? Will I see my kids again?
All that stuff is done really well. He has these like hallucinations or like visions of the life he's not going to get to live. And like, he has this nice little scene where his kid and like the street rat gang is building this ramp, and the ramp reaches all the way to heaven. And he's like, I'm building this ramp for you, Dad. And they go up on the ramp, and Marshall's like, oh, son, I have to kick you out now because I know you want to go with me, but I got to go alone. The world needs you. You're still going to do all these great things. And you're like, this is quite some touching stuff. But at the same time,
he's noodleifying in his bed and making like shitty comedy, like
stupid jokes. And you've got Brenda, the corporate devil who sold her stocks in the 3M company.
Yeah.
Before the deal went awry, and like she's also in charge of making this biochemical agents. Like, what is going on?
Yeah, and I want to mention something on Brenda, because the general and Brenda, because everyone comes into his room and just talks because he can't like understand and will probably die. And so Brenda and the general are talking, who's in on it as well. And the general goes, when the nurse arrives, you leave and give me your clearance pass. I should have never gotten into bed with you. You're more evil than I am, and I can be pretty wicked. And it's like, yes, I love that. Like, villains going, I am evil, but not as evil as you. Like,
I can be pretty wicked. Yeah.
Yeah. It's so terribly done. But yes, people come into the room and of course talk because he can't really reply or anything. And this nurse, Nancy, who he kind of has the hots for, but like in a way where he's like...
She's got a soothing voice and she smells nice. He can't see her. His eyes are mush by this point.
Yeah. And Nurse Nancy comes in and like clears his bedpan,
Yeah.
And looks at his dick and goes like, ooh, quite an average man. Like, and he's like, oh man, why you gotta do me like that,
Yeah.
And that part I did find funny. Like, at least she didn't go like, wow, such a big man, If it had done that, I would have been like, oh my God, just kill me now,
And so Nurse Nancy, the one who is quite nice to him, she promises to blow the lid off of all this shit that's going on here and to put, Brenda and her conscripts behind bars. And there's this scene where the government tells Sandy and the boys that Marshall is dead, and they want to have her like come confirm the death. And they show her a box of a corpse that's like, curled in on itself and has no bones. And she looks to them and says, accessory nipple, and walks off. And you're like,
what the fuck? Yeah.
But then in the next scene,
you learn
that she's talking about a Bond villain, like a James Bond villain who had a third nipple and called it his accessory nipple. And presumably Marshall Freeman also has a third nipple and called it the same thing. And so that's how Sandy knew that wasn't really Marshall's body in the casket.
Now, I would have liked to see that, like, and he does it well in so many other spots, but he didn't mention the third nipple before, which is why it was kind of like, what the fuck?
It came out of left field, yeah.
Yeah, so in the morning, he could have slipped that in, like, I pulled my shirt on and admired my third nipple. I mean, that would have been a really weird start to the story,
yeah.
But it would have, like, actually played out in some way.
True. And the only point of that scene in the end isn't because, like, oh, Marshall is still off alive somewhere. No, he dies.
He does die, yep.
He dies, but it was because the government wanted to continue using his body to, like, study his condition, and so they could weaponize the bacterium.
Yeah.
And so they just took a victim of the bacterium, some other person, and showed it to her. But Marshall still dies. One of the last scenes is the nurse Nancy, presumably blowing the lid off of the whole thing. Dr. Feelyhands tries to blackmail Brenda, but she puts a hit out on him, and he's taken out. He gets iced.
Yep.
And Marshall has some abstract end-of-life visions as he passes on.
Yeah, he passes on, and a car pulls up in the white aftermath of death, and in the car is Pete. Some call him Saint Peter. And he brings his brother Al. with him for the ride up, and says that he knows the way, and I know the big guy upstairs. And then he looks in the rearview mirror and sees Al smiling at him, and then he reaches his hand out to shake Pete's hand, and that was the instant I was home. And then it like literally the end of that sentence goes end. ...
End. Yeah.
It's over. And usually in these books, I find that you're up to like 90%, and then there's just like a whole lot of shit about like upcoming books that the author is making that you never want to read, and like cover pages for other shit, and it's just like a load of drivel. But like it was getting to like 100% on my Kindle, and I was like, wow, this is really all the way to the fucking end. I'm really amazed. And then literally on that line, end. Like,
yeah, usually the end of the book and most of the stuff we read is actually only like 80, 90% because the rest is filled with advertisements or some bullshit or author's notes. Not this one.
No. So that was Bacterium 264.
Yes, and gotta say, I liked Bacterium 264.
Yeah, it was not without its issues. A lot of it didn't make sense, but it had a story.
It's an actual story with actual characters whose A plot and B plot begin separately and then come together as the narrative progresses.
Yeah, it had some foreshadowing, some good foreshadowing. It had some intensity, and it goddamn didn't fucking take itself too seriously. I feel like Dutch Fisher wrote this book and he was like, this is a silly story. I want to get some stuff out there, but I'm not going to take it too seriously. I know I'm not like God's gift to writing, and it doesn't come across that way.
But at the same time, it is also quite a heartfelt story.
Yes.
And has some pretty emotional scenes in it.
Yep. And I have nothing but praise. Now, it was still littered with mistakes, spelling mistakes and stuff like that.
Yeah, I will say, I mean, I did enjoy this book, but it was also at times a complete and utter ramble.
Yeah.
But one of the weirdest things to me, and I don't know if this is just my version of it, or maybe you also have this. First of all, this book pays no mind to quotations starting or ending half the time.
Oh, yeah, that's terrible.
Most of the time, the dialogue just starts in the middle of a paragraph and there's no quotations for it. But there's even a quotation mark, just one quotation mark in the whole book that is red.
Red. I saw that too, and
I don't know what that is.
Someone didn't finish their proofreading. Like,
yeah, and not only that, but like the second to last chapter and the first paragraph in the last chapter are also like gray. Like the font is a different color than it should be for some reason.
Oh yeah, I see that.
I have no idea why.
I didn't notice that when I was reading, but now I see it. Wow, that's strange.
Just like everything else in the story, the book itself is also just a bit strange.
It's a little bit off.
Yeah.
Just a little bit off. Now, you could say, like, okay, mate, just shouldn't have released it. Just
take one more fucking look at it.
Yeah, give it another look over, give it some real fucking analysis. Take out all the fucking army shit and take out all the, like, pointless...
Yeah.
Fix the goddamn lizard scene with the weird lid smashing. Like, what is that? That just... I mean, that was my favorite part of the book, but it was also the most obscene scene I think I've ever read. Like,
yeah. But so that was Bacterium 264, and it did live up to our expectations of it, which weren't very high, but it was better than More of the Shade.
In all honesty, like for a book that had a synopsis that just simply said the story of Marshall Freeman, my expectations were pretty like... they were pretty low, and I could have never predicted what was going to happen in this one, and this might be the wackiest story that I think we've read so far, for sure.
Yes, and next time on the show, we're going to be looking at a book called Beasts, War of Reckoning.
Man, these titles.
What do you think of that title, Kevin?
Beasts, War of Reckoning. We don't know much about this book, but going by the title, I would think that there's some beasties in it and there's some reckoning in it. And that's all you really need to make a story good.
Yeah, possibly our reckoning, possibly the beasts. Now, in this book, there are two kinds of beasts. There are the man beasts.
That's us.
And then there are the beasts of the title's namesake, which are Sasquatch.
Now, this will be our first Sasquatch book.
It very well will be, yeah.
Yeah. Now, Sasquatch, similar, but not exactly similar to a gargoyle. Gargoyle as being a favorite of our series. So hopefully Sasquatches become a close second.
Yeah, and perhaps they'll become a staple of our show.
Yes.
Because there is actually quite a broad Sasquatch genre we've discovered.
Sasquatch harem romance. Reverse harem Sasquatch.
God. But this is not a romance. This is a war-themed story between Sasquatch and mankind.
Well, yeah, it's got War of Reckoning in it. But knowing the books that we usually look at, it could well end up being a reverse harem story. You just never know.
We just never know.
Thank you everyone for listening and supporting the show. And please, if you can, support us on Patreon, and doubly so, share our podcast with your friends. It's a huge help, and thank you to all of those who already do that. If you have a book you want us to look at, share it with us on one of our platforms and we'll consider it for the show. Thanks!